Brad Keith Sigmon is a convicted murderer who was given the death penalty for the double murder of his ex-girlfriend's parents in South Carolina in 2001. The date of his execution is set to be March 7, 2025. Born on November 12, 1957, in the U.S. state of South Carolina, Keith Sigmon is the oldest of his family's 5 children. When he was born, his mother was just 17 years old. She also had 4 other children, each of whom were conceived a year apart. Because of Sigmon's father's job in the U.S. military, the family had to relocate often, including to the Philippines soon after the birth of Sigmon's youngest and 5th sibling. Because Sigmon's father, Ronnie, was an alcoholic who frequently mistreated his wife, and because Sigmon's mother, Virginia Wooten, found it difficult to balance the demands of being a young mother with adjusting to military life, the couple finally divorced when he was still a little boy. Ronnie also abused Sigmon, the oldest child, even though he never touched his 4 younger children. Sigmon would frequently shield his mother from his father's beatings. After a while, Sigmon's parents got into other relationships and married again, and he frequently switched between his step-parents and his parents. In spite of these incidents, Sigmon's childhood was fairly normal. Since he took on the role of caring for his younger siblings following his parents' divorce, he started working at the age of 16 while still in high school to help ease the financial strain on his family. In order to get married, Sigmon left high school at the age of 19, 9 weeks before his graduation date. He then had a son. Sigmon was a devoted son, father, and brother who genuinely cared for his family, according to his own son, parents, siblings, stepfather, and aunt. According to court sources, Sigmon battled mental health problems and substance abuse throughout his adult life. In South Carolina, Brad Sigmon, then 43, killed his ex-girlfriend's parents, Gladys and David Lark, on April 27, 2001. The double murder occurred after Sigmon and Rebecca Barbar, who lived in a trailer near Barbar's parents' house, had been romantically involved for almost 3 years. But early that year, after Barbar broke up with him and moved in with her parents, Sigmon's obsession with her grew stronger. He even went so far as keeping tabs on her to see whether she was seeing someone else, in addition to his constant demands to resume their relationship. Sigmon and his companion Eugene Straub spent the night drinking beer and using cocaine on the eve of the murder. Sigmon told Straub the next morning that he would visit the Larks' home, tie her parents up, and get a hold of Barbar as she departed to take her kids to school. At first, Straub was expected to help carry out Sigmon's plan, but he eventually changed his mind. When Sigmon arrived at the Larks' house by himself, he saw Gladys, 59, in the living room and David, 62, in the kitchen. Equipped with a baseball bat, Sigmon assaulted the pair, repeatedly striking them with the bat while pacing between the 2 rooms. Both of the Larks were hit 9 times in the head, resulting in the crushing of their skulls. Sigmon ceased the attack only after noticing that the pair had passed away. He then waited for Barbar to come home after killing the Larks and taking David's rifle. Sigmon used the gun to pressure Barbar into getting into the car when she got home. Sigmon had first intended to drive to North Carolina with Barbar in his own vehicle. She was able to leap out of the car and attempted to flee, therefore the plan did not work out as intended. She escaped after Sigmon shot at her during the pursuit, and Sigmon eventually gave up and left the area. The woman later received medical care at Greenville Memorial Hospital. The police launched a manhunt for Sigmon once the deaths were made public, and he was charged with murder, kidnapping, and assault with intent to kill. After 11 days on the run, he was finally apprehended in Gatlinburg, Tennessee, and brought back to South Carolina. In connection with the double murder charges, the state authorities also intended to pursue Sigmon's execution. When he was finally put on trial in July 2002 on 2 murder charges and 1 count of first-degree burglary, he allegedly confessed to the jury that he was indeed guilty. He was later found guilty of all charges by the jury, who also determined his sentence. The prosecution requested that Sigmon be given the death penalty, arguing that both Gladys and David Lark had the most horrific death and that Sigmon should get the same fate as his victims. The defense responded by asking the jury to take into account that Sigmon's relationship troubles were the reason behind his outbursts, and they also mentioned the mitigating circumstances of his case, such as his excellent behavior while incarcerated and his drug use as an adult, in order to seek life in prison for Sigmon. On July 20, 2022, the jury unanimously decided to execute Sigmon on both murder charges. In addition to the 2 death sentences, he also received a 30-year jail sentence for the burglary offense. Sigmon was initially set to be put to death on February 12, 2021, after he had exhausted all of his appeals. The South Carolina Supreme Court, however, granted Sigmon an indefinite stay of execution on February 5, 2021, 1 week prior to the actual date, after concluding that the state lacked the drugs required to enable Sigmon's execution by lethal injection, which was the state's only authorized option. Since the state's last execution in 2011, South Carolina had essentially put an unofficial halt to executions at that point. Due to the expiration of current stocks and the unwillingness of numerous pharmaceutical companies to offer medications for execution, there was a shortage of lethal injection drugs. Authorities in South Carolina enacted new legislation to permit firing squad executions and reintroduced the electric chair as alternatives to lethal injections, in the event that the state was unable to carry out these procedures. After the state authorities successfully obtained new medications, the lack of fatal injection drugs in the state would finally be addressed in September 2023, enabling the state to restart lethal injection executions. Following the enactment of the new legislation, Sigmon and Freddie Eugene Owens, another death row convict, were scheduled for execution. Owens' date was set precisely 1 week after Sigmon's, June 25th, and Sigmon's was rescheduled to be executed by electric chair on June 18, 2021. Sigmon's second death warrant, however, was suspended, and consequently Owens, after the South Carolina Supreme Court decided that Sigmon and Owens' executions should be delayed until they were offered the option of choosing between being executed by firing squad or electrocution, particularly since the latter was not yet finalized and the former was the only execution method available at the time. Both Owens and Sigmon had sued the state for reviving the electric chair, which was another factor in the stay of execution. The date of Sigmon's execution was moved to May 13, 2022, after his third death warrant was issued a year later. However, Sigmon was granted yet another stay of execution until the litigation was fully resolved, as the condemned had filed a lawsuit against the electric chair and firing squad methods. Brad Sigmon was one of several death row inmates who sued South Carolina in 2023 over the state's adoption of the electric chair and firing squad as substitute methods. The prisoners claimed that these techniques were unconstitutional because they would cause needless suffering, which would be considered cruel and unusual punishment. The state retorted that there was no statute mandating that executions of those given death sentences be painless or instantaneous, and that both the firing squad and the electric chair followed established legal protocols. In a 5-judge decision on July 31, 2024, the South Carolina Supreme Court rejected the case and affirmed the constitutionality of the firing squad and electric chair. With 3 supporting the firing squad and 4 supporting the electric chair, the majority of the justices expressed approval for both techniques. All 32 inmates on South Carolina's death row, including Sigmon, were impacted by this decision, which cleared the path for the possible restart of executions in the state. 5 condemned prisoners, Sigmon, Freddie Eugene Owens, Michael Maddy, Richard Bernard Moore, and Marion Bauman Jr., had exhausted their appeals by the time of this decision and were scheduled for execution at a later date. On September 20, 2024, one of the 5 prisoners, Freddie Owens, was put to death for the 1997 murder of a convenience store clerk, ending South Carolina's 13-year moratorium on executions. Later, on November 1, 2024, Richard Moore became the second condemned prisoner to die. On January 31, 2025, Marion Bauman Jr. became the third of the 6 condemned prisoners on the list to be executed. Brad Sigmon is still on death row for the murder of Gladys and David Lark as of 2025, following the rejection of his legal motion in 2024. A court order was obtained on August 28, 2024, permitting the state to carry out 6 executions throughout the year. The executions are set to take place 5 weeks each or 35 days apart. The South Carolina Supreme Court issued Sigmon's death warrant on February 7, 2025, and set March 7, 2025 as the day of his execution. The court granted him until February 21 to decide whether he would choose to be executed by firing squad, electrocution, or lethal injection. Sigmon will automatically be placed in the electric chair if he refuses to select a technique. He appealed the warrant 1 week after it was signed, requesting that the court postpone his execution because his attorney had not yet received the autopsy report of Marion Bauman Jr., whose execution had occurred 2 weeks earlier, and they wanted to examine it before deciding on Sigmon's preferred method of execution. Sigmon's attorneys claimed that he did not want to die by electric chair and that he was hesitant to choose lethal injection over firing squad because witnesses reported that in the state's 3 prior executions, the inmates were not declared dead within 20 minutes of receiving a single dose of pentobarbital, which made Sigmon concerned about lethal injection. Will he be lucky once more and have his execution postponed? I guess it remains to be seen. Please hit that subscribe button if you like my channel. See you next time. Bye bye.